openly on television, as I told you 20 years ago they would do, promoting microchips for all children, with the Pentagon and the Navy looking at microchipping sailors and soldiers and Marines. I'm not against technology, but the way the elite are deploying technology is, again, designed to shutter the consciousness. Drudge, 4 or 5 months ago, focused in on Zuckerberg of Facebook at a big corporate event, ordering his employees to wear virtual reality goggles over their heads and sit like apes, not evolved, in a little Play-Doh cave, receiving the control paradigm he wanted to, as he, smiling, walked bipedal, a god amongst men. And what's scary is they know our subconscious is more powerful than our conscious hundreds of times. So they bombard us with sick, demoralizing images and messages, both unconsciously and consciously, both overtly and subliminally, to break our will at a subconscious level and make us think we're absolutely outnumbered and totally defeated, so that when someone who is conscious warns you, the magician has already programmed you to the point that you have automatic defenses to see nothing, to hear nothing, to say nothing, to feel nothing. And then you are a true slave. Because a man or woman who's in some supermax prison, who's falsely accused, falsely convicted, who still has will, is a free entity, is a free soul. But when you are so blasted by the lie, when you are so captured by the fraud, that it's heresy to even doubt the world you're in and even question what the mainstream system is saying, because then you're a conspiracy theorist heretic, you are past oblivion into a death cult. We know they lied to us about NSA spying and the ATF shipping guns into Mexico and Fast and Furious to frame the Second Amendment. We know they lied about secret testing on minorities and poor Appalachian whites. We know they lied to us about what glyphosate was doing in the water supply. They lied to us about fluoride causing brain damage and cancer. They lied to us about nuclear reactors leaking radiation. They lied to us about Obamacare being free. They lied to us about thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of things. And the great Nazi propagandist, great at evil, wrote, you can look it up, that good propaganda doesn't need to even be complex or have some edge of truth. It has to be a big, overt, giant lie. Hitler always gets the quote for this. It was actually Goebbels that said it. It's so big, it's so ridiculous, it's so over the top, like Obama saying you didn't build your business, or 2 + 2 = 5, or, you know, you can keep your doctor. It's so over, or Americans shot up the gay bar. No, it was a frickin' guy that hated America and was a foreigner in Seoul. It's so over the top that you just feel alone and have a normalcy bias like Stockholm Syndrome, where you go, I'm all alone. This lie is ridiculous. Why is everyone going along with it? I better go along with it, because who does that say I am? And that's what we're getting down to here, is that it's all to make you feel small. And I'm not saying be on some power trip, but I'm saying reality, the universe, basic truth, nature around us, the stars at night, that's all trillions of times bigger than CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, Pentagon propaganda, the globalist. And we simply have to decide that in our innate ancestral instincts and our spirit and everything God gave us and our own life experiences, we're going to set out to discover what the truth is, and then we're going to reach out, not with all the truth, because none of us have all the answers, but with the bits we figured out with others. And that together, we're going to put it together and come together and try to develop a cosmology that more closely matches the universe and that is based on truth, so that we have a better light in this forest at night to travel together on this great quest and the stairway to heaven that leads potentially to the stars. Because the Bible says the eye has not seen, the ear has not heard what our Creator has in store for us. And whether you believe in the Bible or not, it talks about we're master creators, we're made in the image of God, little God, that we're able to envision and build like the Creator and look at things that were science fiction 100 years ago. We've manifested, we've done it, we've built it. But it isn't like Oprah Winfrey and The Secret where you just believe it and it happens. It's built on generations and their dreams before us. It's built on scientific developments and technological developments, many of them spiritually inspired, and understandings that come together in beautiful ways to move us forward. We are thousands of times more advanced what we were just 1,000 years ago.
Okay, and you can check out the rest of that amazing rant up on the Alex Jones YouTube channel. Going to come back there after the break. We've got one final update on that mass shooting or attempted mass shooting in Germany. Very interesting development. We'll be back for the final segment of the Alex Jones Show live breaking news at Infowars.com. I mentioned just before the break, we've got an update on that situation in Germany. Thankfully, according to the most recent reports, nobody is dead, but the suspect reportedly had a hand grenade and an explosives belt. At first, it appeared as if they were going to blame this on white nationalists, but now it's emerged, according to one eyewitness, that the alleged gunman spoke in broken German. So could it be one of Angela Merkel's migrants gone jihadist? Of course, we reported earlier in the show they've covered up these terror attacks before because it doesn't fit their narrative. Thankfully, no one died, but that's the latest, that it could be a migrant-inspired attack. So we'll be sure to keep up to date with that story. A couple of final news stories here in the last few minutes. We've got Breitbart reporting top lawyer ban referendums to save EU project. In the wake of potential Brexit, a top French lawyer has demanded that the European Union, quote, stop sacrificing the European project and ban referendums. That's right. How dare you even be given the opportunity to vote against the all-powerful USSR, I mean European Union, and even have a referendum in the first place. Laurent Cohen-Tannoui called direct democracy, quote, populist suicide, and claimed that people's opinions in the internet era are invalid. So it's basically, if your opinion disagrees with mine, that's completely invalid. We're going to ban you from even having a referendum in the first place. How dare you even challenge us? Just think of the snobbery associated with that kind of comment, the elitism. And we got another one from Jean-Claude Juncker, the president of the EU Commission, who likes to get drunk and slap people in the face in public. EU president slams part-time Europeans and national opinion, slowing ever closer union. Again, as I said, complete and utter contempt for the very fact that you question whether it's a good idea to be ruled by 4 presidents we don't even know the names of, by numerous unelected commissioners who make our laws, who make our regulations. We don't even elect them. The European Parliament, completely ceremonial, can't even vote down these laws. Jean-Claude Juncker, president of the EU's unelected executive arm, has complained that too many EU officials are listening to, quote, national opinion rather than pushing for an unwanted European superstate. Quote, in former times, all those implied in the project were full-time Europeans. Now we have too many part-time Europeans, he said, according to The Independent. Well, how about we don't have any Europeans? Because it's not about being European. It's not about culture. It's not about fine wine and food. It's nothing to do with that. This is about tyranny. This is about dictatorship. So I would rather be a full-time, fully paid up advocate of parliamentary democracy than a, quote, part-time European or a full-time European. And this is what it comes down to. And this is why they're probably going to win, unfortunately, on the Remain side, because they've made it about, you've got James Corden giving a speech on TV. He's someone who moved to the United States. He doesn't even live in the European Union, talking about how the astronaut Tim Peake looked down on the globe and realized that we should all be interconnected. It's nothing whatsoever to do with that. This is about the freedom to elect the people to represent us, to actually have a stake in the future of our own country. It's not about the observations of an astronaut from high altitude. This is the BS they've wrapped it in. This is the amazingly, astoundingly dumb narrative that many of these young people have swallowed. And that is going to be the issue that swings the vote, unfortunately, unless, a miracle happens at this point, but we remain hopeful. That is going to wrap up this edition of the Alex Jones Show. Breaking news at Infowars.com. David Knight coming up with the 4th hour. Keep it locked in.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show on this Thursday, June 23rd. Will it be Independence Day for Britain, or will it be a vote into obscurity? Of course, the polls are telling us are very evenly divided in Britain, but not in the United States, interestingly enough. There was a poll conducted. Forbes reported that 80% of Americans want Britain to leave the EU. I would be one of those. We would support that. We would say, try leaving the large organization. It worked out great for us when we left Britain. And, the interesting thing in that poll was that former colonies like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, they also support it. But you look, all the rest of the countries, the European countries, all of them said no, interestingly enough. Even though there's a lot of talk about France and other countries, I think they understand that if Britain stays in, they're going to be able to keep this thing from unraveling. And that's the key reason we're seeing so much funny business that's going on in Britain. And I think we're going to talk about Brexit when we come back. But first, I want to talk about, there was a lot of talk yesterday about the presidential campaign. There was a lot of talk about what Donald Trump did. I didn't see anywhere that anybody mentioned outside of the local newspaper in Raleigh, the News and Observer, talked about the fact that when Hillary Clinton went to North Carolina for her prepared speech, the candidate for governor, the Democrat candidate for governor, the Democrat candidate for Senate, the major Democrat candidates in the state did not go to the speech. Isn't that interesting? I find that very interesting, and I find it very interesting, of course, not anything new that the mainstream media would cover for that. We also have some Supreme Court decisions that came down today. Briefly in the news, we've got Obama's immigration plan was blocked by the Supreme Court. Of course, this was a 4-4 tie. What that will do is allow a lower court decision to stand. It will not establish a precedent in that case. And what was this about? Well, this was something that was led by 26 Republicans, 26 Republican-dominated states, I should say, pushing back against the idea that Obama is going to give special treatment and block the deportation of 4 million immigrants. These are people who came here as children. These are people who are the parents of the children that they wanted to come in here, okay? So he was going to protect all of these from being deported, and basically the lower court said, no, he doesn't have the authority to do that. He doesn't have the authority to overrule immigration law, does he? By executive order. So great, that's a good decision at the lower court. The Supreme Court couldn't make a decision 4-4. Couldn't decide whether or not the president can rule by executive fiat. Isn't that amazing? But that's going to let that lower court ruling stand. Another one that I found interesting, the High Court strikes limits on, put some limits on drunk driving test laws. Now, they're saying that the police can still do they can still penalize you for not doing a breath test, but they're saying that they need to have a search warrant if they're going to do a blood test, that you can refuse with a blood test. Now, it's not clear, based on this article that I read here from the AP, whether or not they're going to allow the drivers to have any say-so as to whether or not they're going to have a forced blood draw. Of course, that's what we have here in Texas, and some other states have started doing that. I would assume that they're not going to allow that. But of course, the penalties that we have in all 50 states, as the article points out, if you refuse any of these drunk driving tests, they will take your license. But there were 11 states that added additional criminal penalties over that. Isn't that amazing? They take the fundamental right to move in this country, and they turn it into a privilege that the government grants. And then they say, if you don't take these tests, if you don't give us your blood on demand, we're not only going to take away that privilege, which used to be a right to move around, but we're also going to add additional criminal penalties to you. I had somebody on Twitter tell me, well, there's a fundamental difference between walking down the street and driving a car. And I said, yeah, the fundamental difference is the way they treat you. But don't worry, they're going to make walking down the street a privilege pretty soon, too. They'll be forcing taking your blood when you're walking down the street as well. That's what these vampires are going to do. Stay with us. We're going to talk about Brexit, and we're going to talk about this ridiculous filibuster going on in the House. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show on this Thursday, June 23rd, 2016. I'm David Knight. We were just talking about some Supreme Court decisions that came out. Of course, they had a ruling on whether or not there could be additional penalties against you if you refuse to take a drunk driving blood test. Now, of course, they're going to remove your license. They always say that because it's a privilege, not a right to travel in this country, they say. But, of course, this